Now it's recording. So
we had the executive board meeting. I said, well, who should we have for the speaker? And dear Linda Baby said, why don't you do it, Skip? And I said, well, all right, I can do that. Thinking, I'll give the talk that I give to the 8th graders every year. No big deal. Well, my husband assured me that wasn't an appropriate talk, that I had to give something else. So, I hope you enjoy this. I hope you learn something. And I hope it brings back some pleasant memories for you. And I hope I know how to run this. Well, I hit the first one wrong. How do I get it? There. The name of the talk is The Evolution of Grove City. Booms, Busts, and Bubble City. Johnny and I grew up east of Pittsburgh in a community called Forest Hills. We were up on the hill from the steel mills. And every night, if you grew up in a steel town, you know there was the red sky. The red sky was not red sky of nice sailor's delight, no. The red sky meant jobs. It was the steel mills, the blast furnaces. That was part of being in Pittsburgh. My family did not work at the steel mills. My father worked at Westinghouse. In fact, my father and mother met at Westinghouse. Women were allowed to work until they got married. When they got married, they couldn't work anymore. Johnny's grandfather came every day and met my grandfather, and they walked to work together at the Union Switch and Signal. It was about a 5-mile walk. This was in the early 1900s, and it was assumed that the next generation would work at the Switch or Westinghouse or the steel mills, and subsequent generations would keep on doing that. However, when it came to my cousins who went to the Switch, before they turned 40, the Switch shut down, as did Westinghouse, as did the steel mills. And all of a sudden, we had a generation with no jobs. There was a bust to really rival anything that had been known before. Western Pennsylvania, Eastern Ohio, shut down. Everything was lost. Another industry that went boom is the glass industry. Johnny and I are glass collectors. In 1837, you can see the frame on your left, the glass industries. Then look in 1902, the glass industries. Now this is Western Pennsylvania. 2004, you can see there's a few glass industries. Today, there are 2 glass industries. There's Fenton in Williamstown, West Virginia, and there is Mosser in Cambridge, Ohio. There is a glass block factory that's owned by the French, I believe, in Port Allegheny, and that's it. There are some cottage industries. In fact, there's one in Hilliard, Pennsylvania. Out in the middle of nowhere, there is a lampwork glass factory. At least there was a few years ago. We haven't been back. But that's an industry that boomed and busted big time. Another one that we all know about is the oil industry in Franklin, Oil City, and Titusville. It's gone. We are now seeing the beginning of an industry with the Marcus and Utica Shale. Probably none of us will live to see if that busts, but it is certainly beginning. Grove City began very quietly and in an unassuming way in 1798 when a young man from Huntington by the name of Valentine Cunningham came with his wife and children and his brother-in-law to western Pennsylvania. He had a 400-acre land grant. He was looking for something specific, and when he arrived, he found what he wanted, a source of water. He wanted to start a grist mill. He came with his wife's brother and their family, and they started the mill. This is Valentine Cunningham's mill. Now, you don't start a business when there's nobody here. Russell Couvert's family was here. Tom McCoy, you remember Pete and Tom McCoy? Tom's family was here. There were Indians, there were hunters, trappers, surveyors. There were a lot of people here. Valentine Cunningham built his first little house on Liberty Street near a settlement of friendly Indians. Margaret, Valentine's wife, named the area Pine Grove because of the pine trees. She named the creek Wolf Creek because of all the packs of wolves that came every evening and morning to get a drink and to feed, because other little animals also came for water. And so it was a source of food not only for the Cunninghams, but for the wolves. Valentine's brother-in-law moved about a mile north, and he built a mill. Now there's lots of discrepancies in the stories. Where he built his mill was called Slab Town. One version of the reason it was called Slab Town was because there were slabs of slate in the ground that they dug up and put over the holes in the road. They had potholes even back then. Another version was that there was a lumber mill that built across from the mill, and there were slabs of wood. So whatever, it was called Slab Town, and that actually was more active than Pine Grove because it had the two businesses. In 1804, the county designated a road from the Glen Mill to Mercer. It's now Route 58. Valentine Cunningham never got to see the road. It was actually built in 1807, but he died in 1805. Margaret died in 1800. So they really lived a very short time. They are both buried in the Little Presbyterian Cemetery down on Greenwood Drive. The mill that Margaret's brother started in Slabtown is now John Court's chiropractic office. So it is still in existence. The area remained Pine Grove until 1883, when the borough became incorporated and the name was changed from Pine Grove to Grove City. This is the oldest house in Grove City. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, every year I put a star on the back of a placemat, and that's the person that gets the flower. Didn't do that this year. Whoever has that house for their placemat gets the flower. Now I know this table moved their placemats around, so you figure it out.
Yeah, Joel.
But
Joel.
this is a significant house. I call this house a wowzer. This house was built about 1840 by Hiram White. He owned hundreds of acres. They went clear past the Coker Floral Company. Then it was sold to John Tidball, and then it was sold to Mr. Fleming, who was the first postmaster. So this house originally had 3 front doors. This picture, well, this is the house as it stands today, has a front door and 2 windows. But originally it had 3 front doors. This is where the first post office was located. This is where the office to the first tannery in Grove City was located. And of course, when I asked the 8th grade classes what a tannery is, you know what they say. Where do you go and get a tan? It was also where the first grocery store was located. Now, if that isn't a wow, I don't know what is. Any one of those would be significant. But that's not the whole story. There was a door at the side of the house that went up to the 2nd floor. And on the 2nd floor is where the first classes of Grove City College were located. The Pine Grove Select School, which was the forerunner of Grove City College, was started up there. You all know where this house is. It's on Liberty Street, yes. Young's Dairy. Jim Young's family bought the house in 1857, and it remained in their family until Jim died about 2006. This house had a modern convenience. On the 2nd floor, it had a trap door that was connected by probably a leather strap to a trap door on the 1st floor, and if you pulled the 2 doors, you could drop a bucket down to a cistern, which was in the basement. And that's how you could get water up to the 1st floor or the 2nd floor. So that house, I call a wowzer. In 1898, a medical doctor by the name of E.J. Fithian decided he didn't want to practice medicine anymore. So he closed his practice in the Elwood City area and moved to Grove City. And with his friend, Jack Carruthers, started the Carruthers-Fithian Clutch Company. They developed a friction clutch and cylinders for oil-burning engines. The company evolved over the years. It was Cooper Bessemer, Cooper Cameron, Cooper Industries. It had many names over the years. The company was here for 102 years. When it closed, the impact that it had on the community was not what you would expect. It was not a bust like the steel mills in Westinghouse and the Switch in Pittsburgh. People sensed that the company was running into trouble. And so gradually, people took jobs elsewhere. A few moved out of the area. I was selling real estate at the time, so I was very sensitive to the housing market. And there were some houses that came on the market, but there was never a glut of houses. People got jobs, General Electric, Pine Instruments, within the community. Pardon me? George Jr. So when the company actually closed, the people that were left were mostly retirees who were not going to go anywhere. So we never experienced the horrible, catastrophic loss that Pittsburgh experienced. Grove City was very fortunate, is very fortunate. We had 2 things going for us. We had coal under the ground, and we had good soil above the ground. These are the coal mines that were in this area. You can see where Grove City is, down in the lower right, and Mercer. They went up sort of between 173 and 79. A coal mine in Hallville mined between 12 and 15 tons of coal a day. That's a lot of coal. The people that ran the mines were mostly from Europe, mainly Italians. They came and they worked in the mines. The life of a miner was pretty horrible. Like any industry, they had their union, their mafia, whatever you wanted to call it. It's called the Black Hands. And every miner had to pay a percentage of his pay for protection every payday. If he didn't, retribution was swift and final. The motto of the Black Hands was comply or die. If somebody didn't pay and they disappeared, no questions were asked. Nobody was ever prosecuted, but everybody else paid up the next time because they knew what would happen. The stories of what mining was like, the miner's life, was not very nice. Towns grew up around the mines. We still have mining houses. Number 2, number 5, and Pinchalong Road still has mining houses. Many of them are gone, and those that are still left have been altered. In fact, Bob Siegfried bought one of the mining houses on Pinchalong Road and remodeled it, and it was on the library house tour last year. But these houses were usually 4 rooms, 2 on the first floor, 2 on the second floor. And the beds on the second floor were in use 24/7. The work shift was 12 hours, so the men worked 12 hours and they slept 12 hours. Took some time out to eat and party a little bit, but the beds were in constant use. Of course, there's all kinds of funny stories too. One that I like is where the Pinchalong name came from. Pinchalong Mine was run by a man named Mr. Spear. He was from Scotland. And of course, the Scottish are notorious for being tightwads. And his men were not very good at managing their money. So before payday, they would go to Mr. Spear and ask for an advance in their salary. And he'd say, no, pinch along, boys, pinch along until payday. And so the mine became known as the Pinchalong Mine, and we still have Pinchalong Road. The other good thing that we had was good soil. And farming was very, very important, especially dairy farming. In 1914, the Agriculture Department of the United States government wanted to start a creamery. And they sent a Mr. Dahlberg to Pennsylvania to tour the state and see if he could find a community that was willing to support a creamery. He came to Grove City and he met with Mr. Harshaw, E.B. Harshaw, who was one of the managers of a bank. He was impressed with Mr. Harshaw. Now, Mr. Harshaw was one of the members of the commercial club. And throughout the early 1900s, anything positive that happened in Grove City, somehow the commercial club was involved in it. They were the movers and shakers. The Fithians, the McBrides, the Carruthers, the Englishes, they were the movers and shakers. So the government came back, they met with Mr. Harshaw, and they decided to put the creamery here. They purchased several lots on Lincoln Avenue from Cooper Bessemer. And who owned Cooper Bessemer, who was one of the founders? E.J. Fithian. So there's Mr. Fithian involved in it. They paid $3,750 for these lots. And they built the creamery. They sold shares of stock to raise the money for the creamery. The first day that they opened, 20 patrons came and brought milk from their cows. In 1916, Mr. Harshaw sponsored a group to go to Michigan and buy cattle. And they brought back a train carload of Holsteins, Guernseys, and Jerseys. They sold them to the local farmers at cost. Now the bank was standing the cost of this. They sold them at cost. One farmer came back and said he had better production of milk from one purebred cattle than he did from his 25 cows in his existing herd. So it was a success. In 1934, the creamery was sold to the Borden Company. In 1941, it was sold to Lewis Dairy of Pittsburgh. In 1948, it was sold to Meadowgold, and at that point, it closed. The creamery was in existence for 33 years. Now, it's hard to imagine now when I talk to the students and tell them that that stood on Lincoln Avenue where the USIS building is. It's beyond their comprehension. But those buildings were still standing when we moved here. Yes, Joanne?
When I was in, I think, 8th grade, in a Girl Scout troop, and we toured the creamery, and I still remember that.
Oh, yeah, yeah. When we came here, the buildings were here, but they were storage units for Book Davis Company. Early in the 1900s, there was no medical facility in Grove City. Mercer had a hospital, and so everybody had to be admitted to a hospital in Mercer. But in 1907, Isaac Kepler realized the community was growing and we needed a hospital. And so this house on West Main Street, it was built by the Pearsalls, was purchased. Mrs. DeArmond formed a woman's auxiliary. Mrs. R.E. English, whose husband was one of the major stockholders in Cooper Bessemer, was elected the president. The auxiliary is now one of the oldest in the state of Pennsylvania. They had a fundraising dinner, and they raised $391. With that money, they helped furnish the dining room and the kitchen. They bought medical supplies, and they helped furnish the beds. The hospital had 7 beds in it. The women of the auxiliary canned food, they made the hospital gowns, and they served holiday dinners to the patients. I don't know the name of the first doctor. Somewhere I read it was a Dr. Martin, but when I went back to try and confirm that, I can't. But in 1910, Dr. O.O. Bashline came to town, and he started admitting patients here. And he admitted patients for a short time. Now, I never knew Dr. O.O. Bashline, but in my neighborhood, I can remember Mildred Egan and Martha Lindbergh talking about uh-oh Bashline. I never heard him refer to anything other than uh-oh Bashline, and then laugh as they said it. So, I don't know, he must have been a character. Anyway, he started admitting patients, and then his nephew, Dr. Rossman, joined him. And they started serving patients in private homes. This house is at 315 Woodland Avenue. And this was Dr. Rossman's home. And they turned it into the first Bashline Hospital. They had full surgical facilities in this hospital. They also treated patients at a place on North Broad Street. That house is where Grove Manor is now, and I couldn't find a picture of it. But they also had this house on Jackson Street, where they served patients. In 1920, O.O. Bashline tried to buy our house, and he moved 24 beds into the garage, but he wasn't able to complete the sale. So, fortunately, the house was not turned into a hospital. It would have had lots of rooms. It would have been a good hospital. But he did not succeed with that sale. They bought a property at the corner of South Center and Pine Street and built a hospital. And one of the nurses said the hammers never stopped. They were constantly adding and doing remodeling. Then they bought the Pythian estate on Oak Hill and turned that into the Bashline Hospital. Meantime, there's Dr. Bashline and his 3 sons. Meantime, by 1922, the little 7-room hospital was no longer adequate. And so the medical doctors built this hospital on Hillcrest Circle. By 1975, the government came to Grove City and they said that neither hospital was meeting their census, and medical equipment was too expensive to have duplication of services in such a small area that either the hospitals merge or they were both going to be shut down. This was not an easy merger because philosophically, the medical doctors and the osteopaths did not agree. But in 1978, they did merge and they started planning to build a new hospital. This house on Hillcrest Circle was Madeline McBride's home. The Women's Auxiliary was still operating, and Madeline offered her home, it was empty at the time, as a decorator show house. And a decorator came in, and then they had an open house. And the auxiliary raised $8,000 from people touring this house. Pardon me?
And she sold it.
And she sold it. They had pledged $20,000 to the new hospital, and they raised it. And of course, there is the new hospital. A funny story, when we moved to Grove City in 1971, we came October 1st, and beautiful all day, and I was at the house at 8 o'clock in the morning waiting for the movers, knock on the door. And I went, and there's this gentleman in a Burra truck. The truck was out on the street. And he welcomed me to Grove City, and he asked me if I would like to come to his church. And he asked me what church I went to. And I told him. He wanted to know what political affiliation we had. And I told him. And then he asked me if we went to doctors or osteopaths. I didn't know what an osteopath was. But I realized, we found out, that's how you were categorized. You had to go into the little niches. So I did two, but the third one I kind of blew. But anyway, the hospital merged, and of course, a generation has passed since 1978, and we now have a hospital that is functioning and no problems. In 1909, 3 judges from Pittsburgh became concerned about the plight of orphans and delinquent boys in western Pennsylvania. They wanted to find some kind of a facility for these boys. And so they looked around and they found a program in New York, around Buffalo, that was started by a man named William George. And it was a campus facility where the boys lived with house parents and went to school and lived right there. And they liked this concept. And so they started a program, and I don't know how they ended up in Grove City. They were from Allegheny County. Do you know Nanny Jean? Okay. They started with one house. This is the dedication, and it was originally called the Pennsylvania Junior Republic. And then after a period of time, they changed to George Jr. in honor of Mr. George. These are the 3 judges that were interested in starting this school. Of course, the school has expanded tremendously. I don't know if it's good or bad, but we now have over 500 students there. They have 5 sites in Pennsylvania where they have similar facilities. They have one facility like this in Indiana State, and they get referrals from 6 states. So it is, of course, this is their new school. We've been through it. Our son Michael teaches there. We've been through it, and it certainly is a wonderful facility. They have a program called Barge Program, the Barge Boys. And these boys, they're godsends to the Historical Society because they move things upstairs, downstairs, around. They come, they're under the supervision of Matt Louise and Todd Wood. And sometimes they come and laugh because they have to move something that they just moved not too long ago. And we've changed our mind where we want it. And they pick the things up and off they go, no problem. So it's a major employer in Grove City, and the Barge Boys take care of the memorial gardens. They take care of cemeteries. If there's senior citizens who can't take care of their yard, they come and help. So they really do a community service. In the late 1800s, a greenhouse was started in Grove City, Cleland Greenhouse, and I got these pictures from Mr. Cullen. He kept the greenhouse, and then he sold it to the Ellenbergers. And in 1920, Fred Coker Sr. bought the greenhouses for his 4 sons. He had been the head horticulturist at the Pittsburgh Cut Flower Company in Pittsburgh. 2 of the sons stayed in Pittsburgh and 2 came to Grove City. Fred Jr. and Eugene, is that correct? Eugene left after a while and started his own nursery in Mars. Is it still running?
Yes.
Is he still living?
No, he's long gone.
Oh.
But his daughter is running a flower shop. The greenhouses there are gone.
Okay, but they're still in Mars. Yes, all right. Well, the Grove City Floral was started in about 1920. The beautiful plantings along the boulevard, the rhododendron and the azaleas, are thanks to Mr. Coker. He was consulted in the plantings there. When he died in 1961, Nanny Jean and Ron took over. Nanny ran the retail business, and Ron was the head flower grower and manager. When Ron retired, Nanny went into full partnership with their son David. So this is the 3rd generation running the Coker Floral Company. Burdick's also started about this time. Ed Burdick Sr. and Ed Burdick Jr. came from Enbridge, Pennsylvania, and they started a smoke shop, magazine store, soda fountain. It was just kind of a general place for people to gather. Bob Fithian and Ted Monroe had a Professor Harmon radio, and they would listen to the ball scores, and then they would call them in to Burdick's, and they would post them in exchange for them getting free Cokes. So it was a gathering place. Then they switched and they started selling men's clothing and furniture, and Mr. Hoffman joined the store. After a while, the furniture and the clothing didn't seem to jive, so Mr. Hoffman moved across the street, and there's Ed Burdick Sr. in his store. That is where Chris Eithen's IPS printing store used to be. You probably remember the inside of the store. I'm sure you were all in there. And after the fire of 1985, they moved to the present location. How Coffee was started, again in the 1920s, when George Howe started a grocery store. And if people spent, and I've heard 2 figures, $5 or $10 on groceries, they got a free pound of fresh roasted coffee. Soon became apparent that people were more interested in the coffee than they were in the groceries. So Mr. Howe closed the grocery store and just started roasting coffee. He would deliver the coffee in his Model T Ford. And the people that he was delivering to would hear him coming, and they'd say, "Here's Hal, here's Hal," and they'd know he was coming. He moved to West Main Street in the early 1930s, and he was no longer delivering coffee. So instead of them saying, "Here's Hal," or "How's here," they changed it to "Here's Hal," because people had to come out to them, and he wanted people to know where Hal was. So that's how they got the motto, "Here's Hal." In 1932, E.J. Fithian, who was always doing something to promote Grove City, found a blacksmith in Brockway by the name of Wendell August. And he was very impressed with the work that he did. He did iron work, made gates and grates, cages for tellers in banks, and he invited him to come to Grove City. He said, "If you come to Grove City, I will back you financially, I will go into business with you, and we need you." So Wendell August came. he really by accident got into the hammered aluminum business. And little did they know that they were founding an industry. This was the first hammered aluminum business. And from this company, at one point there were over 100 hammered aluminum companies in the United States. Grove City had Arthur Armour, Homer Smith, John Finley was in Sandy Lake, Clayton Sheasley was in Slippery Rock, and Jimmy DePonso was down on Miller Avenue. All these were here, but there was a whole hammered aluminum industry across the United States. All the companies have gone out of business except for Wendell August. And of course, we all know what happened last March 6th. However, that was on a Saturday. This was taken Sunday morning. By Wednesday, they were back in production. Talk about the phoenix rising from the ashes. And they are going off in a new direction, and they're working to find a new place, a new permanent home for their manufacturing. They're going to be just fine. In 1954, Pat Bashline and Amy King decided that Grove City needed a library. We did not have one. They went to Harrisburg to talk with people on setting up a library. They talked with librarians in the area to see what they needed, and they started what they called the Little Library. The Junior Women's Club donated $800. The JCs painted walls and assembled bookshelves. This is where the Borough Building was. This was on Majestic Court, which is somewhere near where Stegerwolf's building is. And the library was in there, in that area. Right? You're frowning, Annie.
I was thinking it was near the Caton Theater, the old theater.
Isn't that in the same area?
Yeah.
Down the alley.
It was down the alley.
Yeah.
And the girls literally carried the books
Yes.
themselves to the.
Yes. They collected books in the community. And they collected 700 worthwhile books, in quotes. 500 people joined the first week. When they opened, 100 books a day were circulated. Joya Jordan was the first volunteer librarian. They've moved several times. That's the youth center. And there's Thelma Eithman, who was the first paid librarian. Then they moved. And how do you move a library? You use natural resources. The kids moved them. Then they moved down the street, and when they moved to their present location, there's Smack Montgomery with his, remember his old blue truck with the panels on the side? He's loading up his truck and moving the books. They moved to their new home. And of course, thanks to Linda Bennett, the library has come a long way. And she has moved the library to what it is going to be today. Linda retired after what, 25 years? Yeah. Thelma was there 25 years. We've only had 2 paid librarians, 2 paid head librarians. So Linda has moved the library to this. It's caused a terrible parking problem down on Broad Street and by the Historical Society. But thanks to Linda, the library has moved ahead. Grove City has come full circle. We started with Valentine Cunningham, and all of a sudden, we're back to Valentine Cunningham. A couple of years ago, this wheel was found. We didn't know what it was. We asked Chris Tyner, who is a wood crafter, a specialist, and he, by the construction and by the wood, dated this, that this is the great spur wheel from the original Valentine Cunningham mill. We were fortunate that we were able to organize the borough, the college, and the Historical Society to pool our resources, and we have a display for the Cunningham Wheel. It's down in Cunningham Mill Park, which is just a short distance from where the original mill was. Cunningham Mill Park. What does the Historical Society have to do with all this? Well, it's in our mission statement. The mission of the Grove City Area Historical Society is to preserve the history, heritage, and supporting artifacts of the Grove City area. And that's what we're trying to do. I hope this has brought back memories. Please come and see the Historical Society. We have all new displays. We'll work very hard, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you. And now, Jonathan, I don't know how to shut this down.